Okay. I know it says broadcast live, but we're not live.
Yes. I'm glad you said that because I need to go over there.
And just in case you guys pop off before, I thank you very much. It was wonderful to meet both of you, and I have really enjoyed talking with you. So, just in case I miss you at the very end, I will be here through the whole thing, but just in case you guys pop off before, I thank you very much. It was wonderful to meet both of you, and I have really enjoyed talking with you. So, just in case.
Okay, so I'm glad she said that. When I close it up, we'll just hold until Bobby tells us we're off the air, and so you'll just stay there till at least 30 seconds off the air, if that makes sense. So when I close, basically, don't close your window right away, basically.
And I'll tell you when to start counting in the chat.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Indie Lens. Today's discussion is on the Donut King. Hopefully you enjoy the documentary. We have two guests with us, two wonderful guests. We have Shogo Sano and Yoshie Lewis. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll start with Ms. Yoshie. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll move on to Shogo.
Okay, hi, my name is Yoshie Lewis, and I'm a producer, director, writer. I specialize in documentaries, and I have a particular love and interest for history, and particularly women's history.
Thank you so much, Yoshie. Shogo?
Hi, nice to meet you guys. My name is Shogo Sano. I'm a creative director at the Hive Los Angeles. I am creating the bunch of the TV commercial, so promotional website, corporate communication video, this kind of stuff. I came from Tokyo, Japan, then so moved to Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 70 years.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And to our guests, I am Sifu Sablakwa with WCTE. And in our celebration of Asian American Month, we have two guests from Japan or with the Japanese heritage. And so we'll dive right into those things here in a minute. We'll go back to Yoshie. So tell us just a little bit about yourself and about your background.
More. Okay.
Yes.
I told you about my personal background. My professional background. So
yes,
my
I want my personal background.
Yes, my mother was an immigrant, Japanese heritage. She actually grew up in China and Manchuria during the Japanese occupation in the 1930s and 40s, and then was expatriated back to Japan at the end of the war. So she was there until she was 16 in China, which brought a lot of very interesting sort of synthesis of culture into our home. So yeah, we would call in the Japanese circles nisei, which ni means two. So I'm the second generation here in the United States.
And then thank you. And Shogo, you said that you already gave us a little bit of your background, but I just kind of want to go a little bit more. You mentioned that you are in the film business, creative director, I believe. And what caused you to move from Japan to the United States? Because obviously you were already doing that in Japan, right? And so, unlike some of us that immigrated here, you already had that profession, and then you decided to move to Los Angeles. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. I grew up in Tokyo, Japan, and I lived in Japan until when I was 38 years old. So I started the copywriter in Tokyo when I was 22 2 years old. Then I worked for the bunch of very variety of the clients, including the Pepsi Cola, AIG, so Tokyo Gas, Nissin. Do you know the cup noodle, the Nissin noodle ramen?
Mm-hmm.
This kind of a TV commercial. I wrote the bunch of the TV commercials. Then when I was 33, 34, I promoted to the creative director. Creative director is kind of a boss of copywriter, director, kind of a team boss.
Right.
So creating the team to create the bunch of the so advertisement stuff. Then I had a lot of opportunity to talk to the client directly, making the presentation to the client, this kind of stuff. Then I have many opportunity to talk to the foreign client, so American people, so French, German, that kind of stuff. Then I was motivated to learn more advertisement in Western countries because the advertisement was born in United States or Europe countries. So, I mean, so I talked to the Sebastian about that story. So if you want to eat a sushi, however, sushi chef never been to Japan, I don't want to eat that sushi. So, okay, advertisement was born in United States. That's why I need to go to America to learn how to, so create the advertisement more good advertisement. That's why I tried to move to United States to learn the more advertisement. That's why that's the reason to come to United States.
Well, thank you. Yoshie, I do want to come back to you on your take on the documentary. Obviously, it was based on a Cambodian, and we understand that that's a completely different country from Japan. However, I want to hear your take on it.
Well, there were a few things that really, as a documentarian and as a filmmaker, we always consider story. Where is this driving us to? And the story it's not the plot, it's not the steps that we take to get there. It's just the overall arcing theme of it. And I just felt like there were so many layers, so many textures to this journey of this man and this family. But one of the things that I think is really important to recognize is the universality of so many of those experiences that family went through. It's not a Cambodian experience. It's not an Asian experience. It's a human experience. There, the challenges, the overcoming the challenges, the setting their minds to doing something better and becoming something more to contribute to society. And then also the weaknesses, the challenges, the addictions, the family conflicts. That's really a very, very vital, very important part of this story is that we are also connected and we're really more alike than we are different. That's, I think, the biggest overarching sense that I got from the story. And I felt like there were many stories within the story also.
Right. Well, thank you. Shogo, what about you? How did you relate to the story?
This film is a very impressive. I mean, so I am also immigrant from Japan, even though that is not under the war. But I completely understood his emotion because to move to mother country to the foreign country is a very, very big thing in the life. So because so new country. So language different, culture different, everything is different. So live up in the foreign countries is really, really tough. But he made his life in this country, new countries. So really impressive. So also the very emotional because he has so many up and down life events. So I completely understood so he must be a very stressed out because here that living up in this foreign countries really make him stressed out, I think.
Yeah. And, go ahead, Yoshi.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of speak. I'm very American. I was born here, and so I can speak only from like observing my mother and some of the experiences from my mother. I don't speak Japanese, and you know that I is this. And the reason I don't speak Japanese, nor does my sister, my older sister, 10 years older than me, who came with my mother from Japan, was that she was so busy trying to learn English, and not just the English language, but to assimilate into the culture and to fit in. And, it is challenging because you're not just learning, again, language. We all know that language communication is so vital, that connecting is vital, but she just, she had to work so hard. I think especially in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and my mother was a professional woman too. So there were all sorts of things that I saw challenges and roadblocks to her, or tied to her language skills that were very directly tied to her ethnicity even.
And so with Shogo, you are in the advertising business, and both of you being in, I guess, what I'll call the media or the film industry, so to speak. Shogo, could you talk about, do you have difficulties, and what is the representation of Asian Americans, specifically Japanese Americans? Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yes. Advertising world is a very conservative world, especially in United States, I think. So, for example, when you would go to the Madison Avenue, New York, there are so many agency giants there. Young and Rubicam, Ogilvy and Mazer, Gray Advertising, these kind of, so very, main street of the advertising agencies. But, they are completely white world. So CEO, CFO, CMO, Chief Creative Officer, these people is always the white American Caucasian people. So as an Asian, if you wanna make your advertising business in this country, so you have to get into the Asian market, or try to sell your talent, like film director or writer, art director, designer, is not the business side, but more talent side. So you should go to this kind of stuff, or so selling something with advertisement to Asian people. So it's a very tough to make yourself in this business area.
And go ahead. Thank you. Yoshi, I think even though you're doing production now, at some point you were in a little bit of acting, if I'm not mistaken on that. And then you had mentioned to me about some of the parts you were getting. Could you talk about that and some of the casting that went on in that arena?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to. No, I was very much immersed in it. I started as a dancer and moved over. I was actually a SAG, carried a SAG card, was the union actor, did front work. Yeah, one of the very interesting conversations I ever had with an agent was for a casting in East Tennessee. And my father grew up in Appalachia, very, very Appalachian, the log cabin, literally. And I said, well, this is an interesting story. I'd really like to read for it. And she said, but you're not white. And I said, well, yes, I am. I'm half white. And she said, but you don't look it. So this is a really interesting thing on the flip side. And especially, this is to put it into context. I moved here from Los Angeles in 1990 to Nashville. So this is pretty much during the 90s, during that decade. I was the go-to token Asian actor model in town. And any Asian part, it didn't matter if it was Korean or Chinese and and I tried to explain to them, I don't really look Chinese either. I look more white than I do Chinese. But I think that, that was sort of an interesting perspective that I had to walk through and just try to navigate.
Yeah,
I can also say there's one other kind of funny thing too, and to this day, I still get calls. Yoshie, we need a Japanese family. Do you know them? And I'm like, why would I know every Japanese person in Nashville? This is that's always. I mean, I don't mean that in a hateful way. It always just sort of humors me. It's like, why would I know these?
Right. So for you, Yoshie, amongst Japanese culture, friends, communities, is the language, or are you looked at as fully Japanese? How does that work?
From whom? I'm sorry.
From you within your Japanese community or friends or circles or.
Well, I am what the Japanese have a term called hafu. And no, I think they definitely know that I'm not purely Japanese. I don't look purely Japanese, but I'm always acknowledged and received. And I'm trying to think of an appropriate word. Claimed, maybe, that you're one of us, included. Yeah. I always very much feel that way.
And for you, Shogo, you've talked about even though you've lived here for 17 years, does language still become a challenge for you? Not in you speaking it necessarily, but in your professional arena.
Yeah, definitely yes. I mean, so language stuff is always an issue for me. Because Japanese and English is a completely different language. So there is no shared space. I mean, so still now, when I'm speaking English, my brains are so busy because come up with an idea in Japanese and translate in English, then speak. Then so listen to your words in English and translate in Japanese. This kind of right. Kind of stuff. So especially, but fortunately, the advertising culture was born in the United States. So even the Japanese advertising business area, they are using a bunch of English words, concept, copy, headline, or the main visual, strategy, planning, media. These kind of words is always English. That's why that's lucky for me.
Well, I'll share a little bit about myself. Of course, I've told you all, and usually I'm always interviewing the guests, but I think this kind of fits. And I being an immigrant from Ghana, West Africa, I've lived in America for 25 years or so, and I moved here as a kid. I wish I would have been more keen to pay attention to where my thinking language changed, kind of like what you're talking about, Shogo. I definitely relate to that. Where you're used to thinking in one language while speaking another language, right? And that's, if you don't speak multiple languages, I think I speak about three languages, I think 3 or 4. And if you're not used to thinking in one language while speaking another language, it's almost a foreign concept to grasp, right? And I wish I remember the years when my thinking changed, when I'm just thinking to myself or talking to myself, when it was 100% in English. But there's still one area that I don't do that in, when I'm watching soccer, or we call football, right? Because I think that I've watched grow up and love soccer, so I watch it all with Ghanaians. So in that, when I'm watching soccer, if I'm going to scream at a television, pass the ball, I do that in the Ghanaian languages. But if I'm watching basketball by myself or American football by myself, I never do that. It's always in English And so it's interesting I completely relate to you, Shogo, what you mean by while you're talking, your mind is still trying to translate certain concepts. Perfectly relatable. I do want to talk a little about some stereotypes and what struggles or benefits it creates, right? And I think Yoshi, you relate, and Shogo, you mentioned that you have a daughter who is in school as well, so you can also talk about that. Well, I just throw one out there. You can add on to it if there are more stereotypes you want to talk about. Number one, you're Japanese, so you're supposed to be good at math. You're supposed to be smart, and so. Yoshi, I'm going to start with you. How good is your math skills?
Oh, I think I've joked with Shogo-san when we were working because I line produce with him, which is accounting. So, and I just think, it's very funny. I really do joke about it a lot with my friends. For this, I got an art degree, so I could do math. I did not particularly excel at math in school, nor was I expected to by my parents. Did not put a tremendous pressure on me because I simply didn't enjoy it. So it was always sort of like, I think I could do better, but I'm not super interested in it. And my mother, her thing was always, are you satisfied with your own performance? If you feel okay about what you're doing and are not ashamed of it, then that's okay. Because I did excel in the areas that I knew I wanted to pursue, which were the humanities and arts, very strong language skills, history, and those sorts of things. So, and my mother was an educator also. So she said even when they would evaluate students coming into the college, they were looking more for consistency, or were you always good with the humanities and always maybe a B+ student with math? They were more concerned about that than the up, down. So that's kind of a long answer, but yeah, I don't like math, but I do it for a living.
What about you, Shogo? You talk about it. I know you've talked about your daughter with me privately before, and just the struggles of being Japanese at home, and please share.
Yeah. So I mean, as Yoshi-san said, my daughter is 14 years old right now, the 8th grade. So almost about the end of the 8th grade. But so I think she is also thought from the Japanese people, Japanese kids, so good at the math. I mean, okay, so you must be in the honors class, stuff like that. She is literally good at the math, but I don't think that she does like the math. I think she loves dancing. She's doing the bunch of dance class, and so she is going to the charter school of the dance or performing arts from the 9th grade. Then I think that she has something about kind of an identity crisis, because my family is completely Japanese. My wife is Japanese. The inside of the home is completely Japan, but outside of the home is completely United States, America. So recently, I read her essay about anti-Asian theme. So let me read just the first sentence of that essay. So title is we don't want to live in fear anymore. Hi, my name is Maya Sano, and I live in the world where I'm not considered equal. Over the years, I have accepted I don't fit in. I'll never be able to fit in, no matter how much I try. To Americans, I'm not American. I'm too exotic. I'm a foreign. In Japan, I'm not Japan enough. Culturally, mannerly, educationally, I couldn't fit in as Japanese. So probably, I think, so this type of kids, so falling so the immigrant family, the kids is American because they are second generation, as the Yoshie-san. But if my Yoshie-san so mother is Japanese, father is American, but my family is completely Japanese, like a Cambodian family. So kids is always facing this kind of difficulty, but so I hope to get through this difficulty to be a kind of a cosmopolitan. That's
Right.
really good for this country, I think.
Well, thank you for sharing that personal story so much. I really appreciate you sharing it on here. Yoshi, is there somewhere in that you relate to, and is that how would you advise someone that's younger, that's going through that in navigating that?
Gosh, it almost made me cry, Shogo-san. That's just so heartbreaking, the first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about earlier, I talked about that I feel accepted and included by the Japanese. I think because I'm a little different situation than his daughter, for that word hafu. There's sort of like, well, it's kind of okay because we don't expect as much because you're half American. So there's a little, right. I have a little bit of a grace card there, get out of jail free. But yeah, it's, I think whether if, as an older person now, I think for any young person, whether they're Asian or African American or even white, whatever their gender orientation may be, that I think you just need to be proud of who you are because everybody is original.
Right.
And we need to love ourselves for our originality. I can speak to that very first sentence of we don't want to live in fear anymore. I was bullied in school. I was bullied for being Japanese, and physically assaulted as a child, and not defended by my teachers because this was the 70s, and so the answer was, well, if you would just get along with everybody, they wouldn't pick on you.
Right.
And I'm glad, I think, and I hope the educational system has progressed tremendously in the last 40 years or 30, however many years since I was in school. But I even with that having happened in my life, never walked the streets in fear until now. Never, ever. And now I feel like I hope they don't recognize I'm Japanese. There are places and times when, I think, oh, well, right now my hair color isn't dark and I've got my mask on, but oh my gosh, that's the most Asian part of my face that's showing, So I can camouflage a lot better than a lot of Asians. But I've never ever felt like I needed to look over my shoulder until now. And I will tell the world I'm 57 years old. So that's a long time to feel okay.
Thank you so much. Shogo, what about you? You've lived in LA for 17 years. Could you shed light on, I guess, security of Japanese Americans or Asian Americans overall?
Personally, so far, I don't have any opportunity to be, so this kind of, treated by, the discrimination thing, luckily. However, I had some words from my friends, the Japanese friend, the Korean friend, the Chinese friend, someone got, some, so dirty word and an F word. So from the, so the other people. So, but that is not life-threatening stuff. So just, so bad word. So then I told him or her, so please ignore, not fight, just ignore, go away.
Mm-hmm.
That's safe. because so to someone who said this kind of stuff, it's okay. I mean, he is he. I'm not him. It's okay. Go. It's a really sad thing, but I believe this type of discrimination will be gone in the near future. I hope that so this situation is no longer continued. I think.
Yoshie, I think that if I'm not mistaken, not all, but at least a huge amount of that anti-American, maybe not just the sentiment, but the actual actions against Asian American have been by either Black or Hispanic. If I'm not mistaken, that is correct. Do you have any thoughts on that at all? I know that's not your area. I'm not asking you as your expertise, but just personally.
Yeah, I mean, I've observed that for sure, watching the news, and I'm surprised and I'm not surprised.
Why are you not surprised?
I'm surprised because I feel that really, as someone who comes from a minority group, we should be more sensitive to others and really try to bolster one another up in our experiences. But I'm not surprised for the very same reason. If we wrap all the way back to the beginning with the Donut King and the common humanity, that there are always, no matter what race, going to be people who are trying to progress and be more accepting. There are always going to be people who are bullies. There are always going to be people who, not of their own fault, were damaged as children. And so they bring those bad behaviors or fears or whatever into their adult life. So that's why it doesn't surprise me. Although I would hope that people would be able to empathize and know that, your journey might be just as hard as mine because you're a minority.
Right. Right. Do you have anything to add to that, Shogo?
So you mean the actual experience, or I mean
yeah? Well, just generally your thoughts on this the
anti-Asian situation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I believe that this kind of so people who do this kind of stuff is a super few. I believe is not measured. But so now, as you know, the COVID thing or stuff like that, maybe the anti-Asian is completely focused right now.
Right.
So I saw the news in terms of the anti-Asian increased 160% up. So that's a sad. But I do not want to think so this kind of situation is increasing. Let's protect against this kind of so discrimination makes another discrimination.
Right.
Okay, so I was discriminated by the other people. I'm going to discriminate these people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I don't want to take this kind of idea. That's why let's ignore. Let's wait for so this turbulence go away. This is my idea. Of course, everyone knows. Almost all the people knows discrimination is a really bad idea. Everyone equal. Everyone they try to do that. Everyone has an opportunity to do what you want to do. So I believe the possibility of the human beings. Everyone must be smart to go through this kind of issue. This is my idea.
Right. Well, thank you. Yoshie, you told me when we first spoke about a meme that you saw about equality. Do you remember what that?
I love
Could you talk about that a little?
I love it so much. I found it on a T-shirt, and it said, "Equal rights are not pie. more rights for others does not mean less rights for you.
Right. Yeah, I remember you sharing with me, and I thought that was very very insightful to talk about. Let's see here. Now, Yoshie, we spoke about this a little bit, right? And then we talked about just the American culture and the Japanese culture, and we talked about there's some kind of, and you educated me on this, so I wanted you to educate our viewers as well. We talked about how the history of Japan sometimes has different checkpoints of wars and fighting, but at the same time, my perspective of Japanese people and talking to other people that have lived in Japan, of Japan being very, very humble, very, very polite, very, socially, they almost defer, how is that those two things juxtaposed?
Well, when you talk about the politeness and the deference, graciousness, those are social mores. That's just all part of the social structure and being polite and how we treat one another, particularly within the community, but certainly anybody outside of the community as well. We want to always be nice. We certainly always want to appear nice. This is very important. And it really, I think, ne'er the twain shall meet. I mean, it really has nothing to do with the military aggression or dominance. Japan, feudal Japan was a warring country, and one was several different, what in Italy would have been dukedoms. Many different provinces each had their own different lord that was running it, and just fight. It was the medieval times. I mean, just like in Europe. So just lots of battling. And, as we moved into the 1900s into World War II, or surely through the bleed over from the 1800s to the 1900s, and Japan had a bit of a manifest destiny. So they, that's the nationalism and that the more militant side, which really, it's two different things, really, even though it seems sort of at odds. Yeah.
Right. Shogo, do you want to add something to that?
Oh, yes. I mean, probably I think this is completely decided. It's kind of made from the Japanese history. So maybe the 500 years ago, the kind of samurai era. So as Yoshi-san said, all provinces are completely individual countries. So the one country has one big family, samurai family. Then, one samurai family govern so one province. So that's why. So Japanese is completely, so community oriented, because everyone keep that family to live up so very tough situation of the samurai stuff. So neighbor province and attacking to invade the province, the family with the bunch of samurai, so battling, battling protect their own area. So after the 19th century, so Japan was modernized. So all the province and then getting together the one country, Japan. So that situation is completely imperialist. So Japan completely intended to go out of Japan, then get into the other countries, China, Korea, this kind of stuff. This is completely the same thing. The United States, French, UK, these guys are doing the same thing. That's completely that era, that's a generation. So then after World War II, so Japan is completely beaten up. Then so start the new war under the United States, and now, fortunately, the Japan got back to the normal countries. But so get back to the original story. So Japan is, that's why Japan is a completely community oriented. Let's try to be very humble to the people who are my coworker or family or friends or guests from the foreign countries. So there is one word to say the Japanese emotion is wa. Wa means so work together, so very humble to the other people. This is just one Chinese character. Wa is a very famous word. So Japan is the wa no kuni. Wa is the harmony. No is of kuni is a country. The country of harmony.
Yeah, and I think in Japan, I think you had mentioned, and I think my research also showed that it's very homogeneous, right? Is that correct? Somewhere along the line, like 99, 98% of everyone living in Japan is Japanese, I believe.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that, yeah. So compared to the United States, that's a very homogeneous place. One thing I want to circle back to is as we wrap up here. Yeah, and feel free to bring up any other topic that you guys want to discuss, by the way. But one thing I want to circle back to is being an educator, and some of the educational researchers that I've looked at is the attitude that I've seen that in the research of Asian American or Asian students, specifically Japanese students. And I've seen that attitude in every other area. So I want you to comment on that. I want to go back to the math thing, right? Where the stereotype exists that, oh, you're Japanese, you have to be good at math. Well, the research actually shows that it's the attitude that Japanese have towards, well, in this case, math. Whereas in the research shows that American attitude is, oh, this person is good at math, I'm not. This person is, that great at math, this I'm not. Well, the Japanese attitude is, the more time I spend doing it, the harder I work doing it, the better I will get, and I will overcome this, for at least in the math education area. And so that was equivalent to spending enormous amount of hours getting it, even if you're not predisposed to liking it or whatnot. So that translates into overall getting higher marks of it. But as I look at the overall culture, it seems like this let's just get on with it type of attitude exists. So I want to be corrected or tweaked. Your share, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, I said that my mother sort of didn't push me as far as math because that wasn't something that I intended to pursue per se. But boy, I danced till my feet bled. You better bet. I've practiced that clarinet. I was ever so proud that, I would do overtime on those practices. And I think that, one of the pervasive things that was instilled was that being a minority or being Asian, being an immigrant was not a handicap. And she had a saying, I think I shared this with you, Sivas. My mother used to tell me, she used to say, no such thing as can't. That was her answer for everything. Anytime I had a difficulty, no such thing as can't, just get to it. I no excuses. I don't have time for you. Just turn around and get back onto whatever you were doing and figure it out. And yeah, you're right. There was that sort of, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and get on. We weren't allowed to have a victim mentality. And I think that sometimes becomes, again, I don't want to pinpoint any particular demographic because it reaches across demographics. But I think it's very important that to not get stuck in feeling sorry for yourself because you can't do anything. So if you're not good at math, then yeah, you just apply yourself and do more until you get good, right?
Right.
right, sugar.
Yeah.
And that's just, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's very much a part of, you just stick to it. You just keep going. You just keep trying. Very much a part of the culture. Yeah.
Shogo, could you speak to that,
Yeah, yeah.
please?
Yeah. So I think for me, so Japanese home, Japanese family. So probably I think my daughter until maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, she was still having ELA, English as a second language class. So this type of that kind of second generation kids it's a very hard to try to get the very high score on the English language arts stuff like that. But math is more no language related. It's kind of more literal stuff. Probably I think easier to get a score. That's why Japanese mom is gonna be very education minded mother. Do it, must do it. This kind of stuff. I don't think that the Japanese kids is good at the math. This is just a situation.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
that makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember also one of the things that I observed as a kid, is that I would watch my American friends and that my mom helped me with my homework. And I was like, what? My parents never even asked if I had homework. I mean, the onus was on me to figure this out and get it done. Like, it's your responsibility. And I think that accountability of owning your own destiny, your own responsibilities was also something that was very much instilled. It was so unfair that my friends were getting paid for their grades. What? This was just expected. It's just,
Right.
and this goes back, I think this wraps around back to kind of, I think where you were going with this question is that level of expectation.
Yes, exactly.
If you expect more, if you expect more from yourself, the parents expected more, we were taught to expect more, you achieve more. And I mean, you certainly listen to any self-help guru, motivational speaker. That is always, at the end of the day, the bottom line quotient. You have got to believe in yourself. And I think that is probably a handicap for a lot of minorities generationally, unfortunately, because they've learned generationally to be beaten down and
Right.
that they need to be lifted up.
Yeah, that is an important point, and I made the point to you, which I'll make here. I didn't know we will get here, but as we're kind of close, so I'll have you to I'll have you to do a closing remark soon. But one of the things we did mention is I personally have noticed the lack of Japanese or Asian American in politics overall, right? Yet, nevertheless, there's not that stagnation in economical development over the history of Japanese from 60s, 70s or whatever. That's not been any stagnation. And Yoshi, you and I spoke about that a little bit in the sudden length. So is that, and from my research, just looking at, is just seeing that there's a different attitude that the Japanese have compared to the American overall. I'm not saying that the American doesn't have that attitude. It's just a slightly different. And I guess my question is that indicative of a Japanese in America, or is that indicative of Japanese in Japan as well?
Yeah. I think there's just not a whole lot of, and correct me, Yoshiga-san, if I'm wrong, but I think there's just a whole lot of you just don't complain. You just don't complain. You just suck it up and get on with it. And right, that's I feel that's very much, and that's probably why we haven't seen as much political movement until more recently. And again, you start getting into the second, third generations of Asians. Right. We're very Americanized, much more Americanized. So, I can be very opinionated, and I certainly speak my mind. That's just not something that I see from expats, or immigrants, and certainly, from what I understand from my mother about Japanese culture was you just yeah.
Sugar, what about you? Add to that, please.
So you mean that the question is a political thing, or I mean, cultural
Yeah,
stuff?
that too, and you can also talk about what Yoshi talked about expressing your mind and how you would handle certain things about either being blunt or being more indirect.
Oh, I mean, the Japanese is humble, honest. That's really good. However, sometimes too indirect. Sometimes I don't know what you want to do. The super indirect. Okay, so I mean, for example, so if I do not want to talk to you, maybe American people, sorry, I do not want to talk to you right now. Stop talking. This is a American way. However, Japanese way is completely different. If I do not want to talk to you, I say, sorry, I'm very busy. Right now, I'm very busy. Sorry, blah, 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 blah. That kind of stuff. So maybe that American people who was told like this is, oh, he is very busy. No, he's not busy. He doesn't want to talk to you.
Right.
So always indirect is good side. There is a good side and a bad side. So Japanese society or politics, or I mean the economy, so everything has this kind of element. Direct, or sometimes the case needs a direct communication.
Right.
But sometimes too direct is making some issues.
Right.
But sometimes Japanese society is too much indirect sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's why we don't see those so many politicians or people involved politically in the United States, is that just, again, that graciousness, or you just don't make a big deal about yourself or your issue. Conversely, on the other side of that, I think that American people have also been educated that, I certainly encountered a lot of that through my young womanhood, even to middle-aged womanhood, of the retiring little Japanese woman or, Asian woman. And it's very surprising, I think, for people sometimes.
Right.
But that's the expectation. So put up with anything, right? Because that's what they do. And so sometimes it's taken advantage of too. But to answer your question just very directly, I think the Japanese, and some of the other Asian cultures I can't speak for, but I think probably the Japanese Americans, it's just that, you don't have a big bullhorn. That's just not culturally something that we do.
Right. And I think, Shogo, you can relate to this in advertising, where the difference between American advertising, which is very bold and confrontational to your competitors, compared to the Japanese advertising, where it's not at all, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, so the complete, my, so know-how, experience, so got in Japan, that know-how doesn't work in the United States. That I was getting to the United States, I started learning from scratch. So for creating the advertisement in the United States. So I love American style advertisement, so creative stuff. I'm always excited about creating the writing advertisement in the United States, but it's completely different from the Japan's one. That's very unique.
Well, thank you so much. As we're about to wrap it up here, so Shogo, you are in creative advertisement, and I think we're going to have a website put up, and then Yoshi, we'll leave that one up here for a little while, and then we'll have your website as well. And I want to thank the both of you, bringing so much diversity and a diverse perspective, even Yoshi, with your experience of being half Japanese, half white, and completely American here, but living in both worlds, and Shogo, just immigrating from here and even traveling back and forth, and just the dynamics of it. We just want to say thank you so much at WCT for joining us and for being willing to be on our panel discussion. And for our viewers, we want to say thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Indie Lens. This recording will be put on our website, so you can revisit it if you want to watch it again. And please don't forget, it is your donation and your contribution to your local PBS that make shows like this possible. So once again, we thank you, our audience, for joining us. Have a wonderful night. And to our panelists, thank you so much for joining us as well. As we have their websites on there, please visit their pages to see what they do and learn more about them. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.